Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Post Report podcast. I'm joined by Post Office Ltd Transformation and Operations Director for Mails and Parcels, Jack Dowling. Thank you for joining us today, Jack. Before we get into talking about Pudo and especially Evri, can you start by telling me about your background and what your job entails?
Thank you for inviting me on the podcast. It's a fantastic opportunity for me to speak to NFSP members. My name is Jack Dowling. As you mentioned, I grew up in Tamworth on the outskirts of Birmingham. I studied engineering but found myself in a consulting career in London, working in lots of different industries. I have worked on lots of different transformation projects and through from the devising the strategy all the way through to implementing them, which is really the part of the job that I love. And that's what I'm doing here. We have quite a clear need and quite a clear strategy to move away from being reliant on one carrier to moving into a multi-carrier, multi-service mails proposition at the post office. And my job is to drive us forward and do exactly that.
And you've been in your role a couple of years now. How do you think things have been going with Mails since you joined?
Always a good question. 2 years has gone very, very quickly. I am enormously proud of what the team, with my support, have been able to do. We've gone from something like 4,000 non-raw mail propositions that were almost entirely with Amazon in that period to, I think we're nearly at 45,000 now, with customer drop-off, customer collection, customer returns, with Evri, DPD, Amazon and some DHL thrown in there as well. And as I say, I'm enormously proud of that. Having said that, there's still, it's not lost on any of us, there's still a hell of a lot more to do. We only have a minority of our branches that are able to benefit from the Evri service or the DPD service, and we need to drive those services to a much bigger part of our network. And my hope is that anybody that wants those services, we're going to be able to offer them. So in that respect, it's been a productive 2 years, coming up to 2 years. But we've got lots more to do, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that we need to improve in this podcast.
Can you just talk through how you feel that Evri service is currently going for postmasters?
Absolutely. I've had the pleasure over the last couple of months of being to 5 of our postmaster listening forums across Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Without fail, the topic that's come up the most and first is Evri, so I'm glad you asked the question. Each time I've asked people to just take a step back and look at the arrangement with Evri. They are a separate commercial entity, and they are one that had a mature Pudo network, their parcel shop network. When we were talking to them in 2023, we needed to really get across to them and deliver 2 clear competitive differentiators. The first one is operational excellence. It's absolutely imperative that we operate and scan in and scan out better than our competitors. I think we already do that by virtue of lots of the experience we've had with working with raw mail. The second key competitive differentiator is bringing sales. And that is not something that your Tesco down the road is going to be driving for Evri. And that enabled us to not only go out and get what I believe is a really strong commercial deal for postmasters. We pay remuneration somewhere in the region of 40% higher than what those branches would be able to go and get directly with Evri. Even after taking the costs from the central contribution costs. But just think about that second competitive differentiator in terms of sales. If we are not delivering those sales, then that commercial deal doesn't stack up, and Evri would be better off working with Tesco or one of those parcel shops. So it's absolutely imperative from their perspective, and therefore from our perspective, to encourage Evri to go to more branches, that we have to sell more. And absolutely pressure on those sales has been ramping up. We've just rolled out to an additional 550 branches just the week before we're recording this interview, and we've seen a fantastic uptake in sales in those branches, and I'm really excited to see what those branches and the branches that have had the service for a while now are going to do over the coming peak. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to show Evri that we can deliver those sales, and that is just going to open up more opportunities for more branches in the new year.
There was a comment on one of our WhatsApp groups this week which said that a second-class standard parcel takes 24 seconds to process with 9 horizon entries, whilst an Evri standard parcel takes 65 seconds with 16 horizon entries. In the Evri transaction, the postmaster also has to enter what the product is, plus requesting the sender's address for entry to. The comment stated that something needs to change to move Evri forward. What would you say to this?
First of all, I would say thank you for the question. Second thing I would say is that same question was raised just last night as we were recording this interview. And actually it was one of the postmasters that answered on my behalf before I could get in, and made the point that it is a longer transaction. Having said that, when the staff, and he included himself in this, get more accustomed to the process, that gap does reduce. But let's be clear, there is still a gap. The main reason there's a gap, and this is covered in the question, is because the more information is required. People who've had the service for a long time will remember that the transaction was even worse when we first launched in before last peak. And we did some significant improvements in June. We may be able to continue to do some iterative improvements on the domestic, but it isn't going to change significantly, and that's because Evri need that information to provide the customer value that they want, and therefore they've deemed that information to be mandatory. On the international side, even more of a problem. That transaction is significantly longer. We've recognised that, and I'd like to think that in 2025 we'll be able to improve that significantly, and we've got plans to do that. Just to make that point once more, the reason that Evri desire that information is because it's important for them to provide that service. So if a customer is agitated or a counter clerk is confused as to why we're asking that question, it's important for the insurance that's provided, and it enables us to, if the parcel can't be delivered for some reason, add significant value to that customer. So whilst it is frustrating, I'd love for it not to be the case. I don't think that it's a reason not to be selling. And again, the point that the postmaster made in the room last night was that in the grand scheme of things, unless you're extremely busy at that moment, that is time that we can invest, and it can help us to get to that sales aim. And I don't think it's a reason for us not to get there, and I think that's what branches are seeing and starting to learn, and we can see that in the numbers of the growth of the sales.
You touched on the sales target there. We recently recorded a podcast with Cheadle postmaster Andrew Phipson, who said marketing Evri through social media and contacting previous drop and go customers has helped him achieve the sales target of 35 a week. What other advice would you give postmasters to ensure they hit the target?
Yeah, so I'm aware of Andrew and the fantastic things he's done, and I understand you've recorded a podcast with him, which I'm really looking forward to hearing. He's a great example of one of the hundreds of our postmasters that are exceeding that target now. He's referenced social media, and absolutely we can see that people using the social media assets that are available through the normal portal, for those postmasters that are signed up, they're ready to go, and actually they do address quite a specific need for us, which is to drive customer awareness of post office selling and delivering Evri transactions, because lots of people don't associate those two things like the same way they would for raw mail. So we've got the social media assets. The other thing that I'm sure Andrew could attest is the use of lots of POS in his branch. So we've got posters. Just today I've been looking at some of our Christmas campaign material, which I would urge people to make sure that they have. That's available for Evri. It's also available for our other couriers as well. And again, even what I find myself talking to postmasters about, even just bringing up the fact that the Evri service is available, even if that customer dismisses Evri or decides that they don't want that service and they still want special delivery or they still want raw mail, the fact that we've introduced that product in that conversation will help us drive that customer awareness and help us drive that need that we have. One thing I would remind people, particularly when I get asked around what we're doing from a central marketing perspective, we are really reliant on the postmasters that have these services driving the local awareness in their area, because we're still, as I mentioned earlier, at a minority level where we have Evri services. So it's very difficult for us to be sending out a central message to say these services are available at your post office, because more often than not they're not available. So we're even more dependent than ever before on things like local prospecting and putting A stands outside your branch, which are available from your every delivery driver or every BDE area manager support. And those things we can see really help move the dial and get us to the point where 35 doesn't seem unreasonable at all. And Andrew is a great example of somebody that regularly exceeds that.
Continuing with the sales target, in a survey which the NFSP undertook, which had more than 450 replies, 45% of respondents were unaware of the Evri sales target. The question being asked is, how can Evri sales be withdrawn from postmasters when they don't know what the targets are?
Yeah, really important question, Stephen. 3 key points I want to make here. The first one is that last year, and I take accountability for this, we should have done a better job of being clear that there would be some expectations. We were trying to move very quickly, and people will remember that we were rolling out PUDO services before we'd even done a sales contract. So there's only so much of that we could have done, but we have tried to respond to that feedback. The most recent tranche of every rollout we've done, 550 branches, every single one of those branches had to proactively, upfront, agree that they understood those expectations, particularly around that sales target, but also some scanning stuff in there as well. We've seen that that's driven a step change in engagement from those branches, and it's something that we'll take into future rollouts as well. Us being clearer up front has helped you guys understand what you'll need to do, and therefore driven engagement, and will ultimately drive better results. So really key learning, and one we'll definitely take forward. The third point I want to make is that for those branches that have had their service removed recently, and that's just over the last couple of weeks, there were 170 branches that went into a formal measurement period, and all of those branches were given very clear instructions as to what they needed to do to maintain and keep those services. So I would challenge the idea that we've taken anything away without being clear with people about those. The final point I want to make is that of those 170, there are around 25 branches that did do enough to keep the service, and that was fantastic to see, and that was in part because of the support that we provided to all of those branches, and certainly offered to all of those branches. And every single one of the 145 services that have been removed have gone immediately into other post office branches. So that opportunity has been given to other people in our network that are on the waiting list and waiting to get those Evri services. So it's really important that people understand that we're not losing those opportunities. They're just going elsewhere, and those new branches are going to be given the opportunity to hit those same expectations.
Can I just ask why Evri was taken from some of the branches? Had they received help and support prior to this?
Yes, as I say, for those ones that went into the measurement period, we were really quite hands-on in terms of how we offered support. I know lots of people that engaged in that process, and there were absolutely instances where the branch had circumstances that meant that they couldn't be held to the same standards, and we've worked with Evri to fix some of those. A good example might have been a poor collection period at some point, where evidently if the collections aren't on point, it's unfair to ask our branch to be selling that service. So in examples like that, we've stepped in. I would encourage anybody who wants to find out more about how they can push their Evri sales, or in fact any of their Amazon or DPD sales, they're looking for guidance. You've got your area managers who I personally spend a lot of time with, and we centrally support very, very closely. And we've also got the PUDO mailbox email address, which is really, really useful, and again staffed by people that are in my team and in the branch support team that can help collate resources or provide training or answer any questions that anybody might have. Please don't let it get to the point where it's too late. Please proactively engage with some of those materials.
The NFSP survey also said that 75% of respondents would like more help marketing Evri, whether it's in branch, social media, or prospecting support. What support has been provided so far? What will be provided in the future?
Yeah, again, it's a really good question. There are lots of materials out there, and as I say, we're investing time in our area managers and regional managers in order to help people use them. I was talking to one of my team, and she was making a very valid point actually, that this is sort of akin to a dating app, and that it's not necessarily just enough to help somebody sign up to a dating app. She made the point that if we don't have the chat up lines, this is something I can empathise with, then it only gets us so far. And that's where I think the support that the NFSP can provide, the support that is available through the peer-to-peer network, and also some of the things that we're working on most recently, particularly a how-to guide specifically focused on prospecting, is going to be really, really useful. So we're looking forward to being able to share more details on that. But as I say, if somebody is really struggling and wants to get involved very quickly, we continually run support, training sessions, webinars, and if somebody reaches out to the Pudo mailbox, we can pass on details of how to get involved in those.
In a national meeting we held recently, we were asked why Northern Ireland post offices cannot send parcels to Europe and also can't sell the next day service, but still have to make 35 sales per week.
Yeah. So I answered this question in Belfast, but I'm more than happy to answer it here again. We've made this argument to Evri. Let me take the first part of the question, which is why can't we sell into Europe? Evri run an outsourced operation in Northern Ireland, which means that operationally they are limited. They ship stuff back to GB and then it goes to mainland Europe, which, considering they're now outside of the customs union, means that provides a worse experience for our customers. So that's why we're not offering those European services to our customers. The crux of the question, though, is really around why can they be held to the same standard. What I said to the guys in Belfast is that whilst that target is 35 across GB and Northern Ireland, branches need to do whatever they can do to make sales, but ultimately Post Office will play a role and lobby Evri on behalf of them to make the points that are being made there, which is that they don't have a next day service, they don't have a European service, and therefore actually they shouldn't be expected to reach 35. We are really on your side in this, and we are fighting your corner and we'll continue to fight your corner, but that is the aim that's been set by Evri, and if you get to that level, you're absolutely safe. But clearly in some circumstances it is harder than others to get to that point, and we do try and put across those extenuating circumstances. For Northern Ireland in particular, there were none of the branches of the 145 that have had their service removed were in Northern Ireland, and that's partly because of the points that are in that question that we put to Evri.
How can more branches get different carriers in branch? Some postmasters say they've been waiting a long time for Evri, but haven't had replies to their interest.
Yeah, fantastic question. So, and one I've heard several times. The main way that branches and postmasters need to register their interest is via the wish list process. The vast majority of postmasters have engaged with that, so I'd like to think they know where and how. If there's any doubts around that, please speak to your area manager, because the area manager's got a view of who's registered their interest in different carriers. When we get into the next phase of a rollout, let's take Evri as an example, which hopefully will be at some point in the new year, we will then look at all of the branches that have registered their interest on the wish list, and they will be evaluated against Evri's requirements, and that will obviously help decide which branches get the service. We don't have the capacity to keep providing individual replies continuously, so please just register that interest, and when the next rollout is agreed, your branch will be looked at. The third point I want to make there is that at a macro level, the biggest thing that we can do as a homogenous company in the post office with support from the NFSP is to drive the success of the products that we do have in the branches that we do have, in order to drive the carriers to want to work in more branches. I mentioned two competitive differentiators earlier in operational excellence and sales, and if we can deliver on both of those, we can open up far more opportunities for the rest of our network.
And we spoke about this earlier, but how vital is it for postmasters to highlight the products that they offer through their different carriers on social media?
Yeah, we have touched on this, and it's very clear to me that, the postmasters, and let me be honest, it's a relatively small number of postmasters that are using the social media assets and are really on the front foot with prospecting in their local area, are driving incremental volume. And this is a really important point, and I think sometimes it can be lost. We are not here to just move sales from raw mail to Evri, or from raw mail to DPD, or from Parcels or whatever. We have introduced these new services to drive incremental volume. The only way we do that is by retaining customers better, so driving customer awareness in our branches so that they don't go to our competitors down the road, and bringing in new customers. Maybe they're old customers who aren't using us anymore, and this is where social media and Evri and DPD and Amazon are driving a different conversation and offering those services, particularly through drop and go, or particularly for high volume customers, which is where we've seen the biggest dip over the last 3 or 4 years, driving those customers back into our branch. But how can they if they don't know we're offering those services? So as I say, there seems to be a very clear trajectory difference between the branches that are engaging with social media and the prospecting, bringing customers back into branch, and those that are passive and are just expecting that Evri traffic or DPD traffic to come to them. The final point I would like to make there as well is that when people are engaging with sales and they're driving that customer awareness, they are also driving additional PUDO volume. So they're not just seeing the benefit on the sales, they're not just meeting the sales target, they're also getting significant uplifts in terms of the PUDO volume. One of the things we've done for this Christmas period is introduce our Evri incentive program for those branches that sell Evri, whereby if they sell more Evri parcels, they can earn more on their PUDO, up to 15%, and we're going to run that for 16 weeks. For those branches that aren't involved in Evri, just remember that point I made earlier, which is if we get those branches to sell, that will open up more opportunities. So I think it's a really sensible investment from Post Office into those branches. One more point, because you triggered quite a few things for me as I'm giving this answer, that came up yesterday that seemed to land really well with postmasters, and again we're seeing quite a bit of uptake in customers, is people sometimes have concern around the final delivery element of Evri and DPD, less so DPD, but even sometimes raw mail as well. And what we're finding is that postmasters are being able to show customers that are sending and also receiving these parcels that they can divert those parcels for that final mile into their local post office. That might be a post office on the other side of the country, but it can alleviate some of the concerns that they have around Evri not looking after their parcel, or Evri not leaving it in a safe space, or raw mail's delivery being a bit later than it was expected to be. And that seems to be landing really well with customers. So we're probably going to do a little bit more on that and how we can drive that. But there are so many benefits to that, not least on the sales, but also on the customer collection on the other side. So more to come from us on that. But that seems to be something that's landing really well and making quite a big difference to every sales in particular.
Remuneration is obviously vital for postmasters. How key is it to have as many different carriers in branch as possible?
Yeah, I mean, not just for remuneration, although that's obviously our primary purpose. Multi-carrier is at the heart of what we need to deliver in our mails strategy. That's not just because raw mail is losing market share, it's not just because they're making lots of noise about investing in other out of home. It's just, it's what our customers need. They're using different carriers, they're using different services, and ultimately that's what we're here for. Our mails vision, something I've repeated several times, but I'm happy to do it again, is to provide unparalleled access to mails and parcel services for customers, carriers and retailers. We've still got a long way to go, as I referenced at the beginning of this chat, but multi-carrier is absolutely at the heart of it, and we'll continue to look at providing additional products and additional services, but also most importantly getting some of those that we've already developed out to more branches, and that's a really key for us. The other part that we need to make sure we don't lose sight of is reducing our cost to serve. So it's all very well driving that top line revenue number and remuneration into branches, but we also need to make it easier. We've spoken about transaction times. More we need to do in terms of buying branch transaction times, but also more on Pudo as well. And we're not too far away, I don't think, from being able to offer a next generation of SSKs, hopefully at some point next year, and also some of our what we're calling our portable counter devices, so mobile device, similar to our Amazon device, and being able to service some of our customers with some of the more simple transactions away from the normal terminals. And that is really, as I hear from postmasters, going to make a really big difference to our operational efficiency. So we also really need to make sure we deliver those as well.
Over the last 5 years, it's been a difficult time for Mails. What have the main challenges been?
It absolutely has. That's clear from the numbers, particularly before I started, that the revenue, the income was down substantially year on year. The main reason for this, and the NFSP members will be more than well aware of these, but I think it's good to articulate them, is a significant underlying shift away from high value sales transactions in the post office, but also through other channels as well, to lower value drop-off transactions. I give two examples when I talk about this. The first one is of an eBay seller who traditionally would have come into the post office to post to the other side of the country and would have paid, let's say £5-6 for that transaction. That transaction is now happening up front. eBay have actually just made some very recent changes to actually encourage almost all of their customers to go down an every route. And that's because they've negotiated a much lower rate. They're trying to copy what Vinted are doing, and they're trying to reduce the value of selling and delivering on their platform. And that means that there's less money to go around. The second example, again very similar, is in the space of returns, e-commerce returns. And I know from working in this area in a previous job that what was again traditionally a customer walking into a post office and sending it back to a particular address, that transaction is happening online, and the retailer, who more often than not is now footing the bill, is paying around £1.60, £1.70 for that return service, rather than that customer paying again £5 or £6, sometimes even more. So there is less value out there being paid by customers on the street for the post office to get. That's just a fact, and we have to evolve and we have to adapt to that underlying shift. And that's primarily one of the primary reasons why the multi-carrier shift is so important, because it's the Evris and the Amazons that have gone out and won that volume, and we need to be playing in that space so that we don't lose all of the value. And you're absolutely right, it's been a challenging few years, and those shifts will continue. And Mails will continue to be challenging, but that's even more reason why we need to continue to deliver additional services, but also deliver them really, really effectively and really efficiently.
Finally, we've spoken a lot about Evri today, but what does the future of Mails look like for you?
Yeah, fantastic question to wrap us up. We have spoken a lot about Evri, and it is bigger than Evri. Lots of things I'm really excited about. When I look at the next 12, 18 months, not least it's going to be helped, I think, facilitated by what's coming out of the strategic review, which we've been able to engage with lots of Mails ideas and lots of strategic projects that we want to work on. But there are a few things I want to draw attention to in particular, some of which we've already started. We'll continue to improve the products and services that we've already delivered. We're also going to be investing quite heavily in drop and go and making that journey much faster. We are going to be talking a lot around omni-channel journeys. Drop and go is an example of this, where information is inputted initially on the website, and then that's hopefully pulled through into Horizon, which will make our transaction times much faster. So looking forward to being able to do stuff there. I also really want to, and this is going to take a little bit longer, but develop a post office account, Mails account, where people can save their favourite addresses, they can interact perhaps by a loyalty scheme, they might be able to get discounts, lots of things that we're really excited about from a digital perspective. And a lot of people internally are working on what that's going to look like, and I'm super excited to see that. In-branch technology, I've already mentioned, we've got SSKs, we've got conversations about portable counter devices. They're going to be really important. One of the key points I want to make there is that it's really important from our perspective that those omni-channel bits work together. So we are still driving that transaction into branch, so making sure that postmasters can benefit from the in-branch transaction remuneration. We are absolutely adamant that we don't want to be driving volume away from postmasters in any way, and that omni-channel and that in-branch technology is just a way for us to deliver a much faster and better customer experience, which I think is going to be really important as we're challenged more by other players in the market. In-branch technology, I'd like to think we at some point we'll be talking about drop boxes. That may include some lockers, which would be really exciting as well. So there's definitely more we need to do in-branch technology. And then the final thing I would say is more services in more branches. It is not lost on me, it's not lost on anybody here that we still need to get what we've already done, what we've already worked on, out to more branches so that they can share in that value and share in that remuneration. And we won't lose sight of that, and we'll continue to push that as hard as we possibly can.
Brilliant. Jack, thank you so much for your time today and answering so many questions and issues which postmasters have highlighted over the last few weeks.
Pleasure. Fantastic to be here. Thank you very much.
More episodes of the Post Report podcast are on the NFSP YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe so you're the first to know when new podcasts are uploaded.